Hi, everyone. We're BioFarming for food security. We have in this group myself, Keisha Jackson from the United States, Baruch, Precious, and Isaiah, all from the United States, Levi from Zambia, and our facilitator, Garinda from India. For biofarming, we plan to focus on the areas of biological agriculture, improving access to food and the distribution with the quality of food, tackling food insecurity caused by fluctuating economies. Our preferred state for the problem of food security is to have affordable and appealing food for all. The meat and seafood would be sourced ethically with minimal to no food waste, soil regeneration that would lead to reduced CO2 emissions, increased carbon storage in soil, increased employment opportunities in agriculture, as well as increased food production. For the global problem state, we've identified key areas, including 345 million people are currently facing severe hunger. The planet's topsoil is being rapidly destroyed. 1 in 10 people around the world go to bed hungry every night. 10 to 80% of crop are lost post-harvest. Generally, there's a lack of knowledge on how to farm biologically. And lastly, over 30% of food is wasted yearly. We've identified 3 key causes of the problem state. The first being that while plows have enabled farmers to expand land, it has led to a lot of destruction in the topsoil and soil biome. Secondly, a lack of understanding of the natural system of agriculture in terms of farming with soil life specifically. And third, heavy dependency on pesticides and other chemicals to farm. Now I'll pass it over to my colleague who will continue the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Levi Nyirenda and from Zambia. You can go to the next slide. So just the map here, we can see it shows the number of people who are undernourished, and where it shows red, where it's darker, that's where the hungriest people are. And we've decided to select the central part of the continent, which is Africa, for easy dissemination of information. We can go to the next slide. So as we can see, so here, despite agriculture being the backbone of Africans' economy, but it shows that we pay less value to the agricultural products. So this is the picture here, as you can see, then with the countries that we've selected. We can go to the next slide. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so we've decided to go for Democratic Republic of Congo, Central African Republic, and Chad, which, as I've mentioned, to say these are the countries which are located on the central part of the African continent. Then our vision also is that to make sure that we eliminate or we reduce hunger in the continent globally, but also to improve quality and quantity of the agricultural product, but also to improve access to food through growing the food locally, which is secular instead of the linear one. We can go to the next slide as I hand over to my colleague.
Hello, I'm Baruch Bashan from America. We've talked about farming biologically, but what does that mean? The key concepts are that the microorganisms in the soil are the ones that feed the crops, and that the farmer's role is now to provide these soil creatures with a habitable soil environment, organic matter, and water for them and the plants. Next slide. What are the benefits of farming biologically? Massive benefits. Increased quantities and quality of crops, improved soils, allowing farming in the same location over many years, decreasing deforestation, allowing all the time with decreased costs for the farmer and less water being used. And because of this, there are options for increased profitable opportunities. Next slide. We've decided on a couple of approaches, an approach for reaching the preferred state. We want to demonstrate to farmers in the regions that we've chosen that have serious hunger problem how to grow crops biologically so that they can see the benefits. Farmers are not going to take our say-so. We want to have farmers who are willing to trial and compare the results of growing biologically versus current methods. We want to, once the farmer is convinced of this, of the benefits of this, we want them to create their farm into a hub farm so that it can act as a wheel, a hub of a wheel, as a seed, spreading the knowledge, services, and materials to nearby farms, who can then spread them further on. Next slide. This is a very simple and easy approach to solving world hunger. Most of the farming implements that are needed for this already exist. There will be needed a qualified staff person who will most likely be using, microscope, most likely their own. There will be no new technologies, policies, or programs that will be needed. The governments don't need to be involved. They can be, but they won't need to be. We don't need to do any big, major projects. How many will be needed? We'd like to have at least one hub farm in each of the targeted areas. Next slide. In order to justify scaling up, we want to monitor and record improvements from the beginning of the project throughout time. We want to see what the improvements in the composition of the soil microbes, the benefits of soil structure, harvest yields, crop health, and cost to grow the crops. Next. Again, this is very inexpensive to implement. We need to have a qualified staff person to mentor the farmers and to provide microscope analysis and possible assistance to the hub farm farmers for the first couple of years. Literature in the form of posters, pamphlets, and flyers in the local languages explaining the biological farming so that others can be trained. And there will be compost extracts, and teas that will be created, and there will be some tools that will be needed for those to work with the farmer's existing tool set. Again, human resources there are not a lot needed. The hub farmer and their staff and one staff person. A full-time staff person needs to be hired for each of these hub farms. That person will teach the farmer how to farm biologically, including how to make compost, extracts, and teas, and how to use them. A key piece of growing biologically is conducting microscopic analysis of the soil and compost materials over time, advising the farmer of any changes that need to be created. And assist, of course, the staff person will assist in all farm activities, including creating and conducting demonstration tours for neighboring farmers. Next slide. Who will benefit? Who will implement this? Excuse me. An organization should be a sponsor. An organization will have more credibility than an individual with governments and farmers in the targeted regions. Who is needed for this success? Farmers who are willing to have their farms have trials on their farms and to change their farm, transition their farms totally to hub farms. And above organization as a partner and a qualified staff person per hub farm. Next slide. Again, this is going to be such a minimal cost project. Most of the farming will be done with existing land and tools. Costs will include a full-time staff person paid at the local pay rate for this kind of work, occasional transportation to neighboring farms, and occasional seeds. The money can come from a spectrum of possibilities, from crowdfunding to corporate investment, NGO, or agency donations. The next step, what do we need to get this started? We want to select 1 to 2 locations in each of the target regions to create hub farms. Staff these hub farms with 1 person qualified, as described before, and subsidize these farms until they are self-sufficient if necessary, with money, tools, and equipment. Next slide. For the next 6 months, we want to acquire an organization or 1 or more organizations as a sponsor and partner, identify 1 to 2 farmers in each of the targeted regions who will be willing to conduct trials, comparing the current methods and biological methods of farming, and to convert their farms to hub farms. Come to an agreement with these farms and the partner organization as to what is to happen and hire a qualified person for each hub farm. Now we'll turn this over to Precious.
Hi everyone, my name is Precious and I'll be taking this part of the slide. So upon all agreement by we all agree that biological farming results in improving the farming economic system, and it expands the numbers of hog farming into other religions with high numbers of people that can get enough food. Next slide, please. Next slide. So the strategies that we can use, both the government and the national and local is the target that can help us locate farmers that are willing to do the hog farming, and the funding from local government and foundation and the non-profit will make it implement for the hog farming. That will make it easier than everybody getting their own farm. Next slide, please.
To summarize, farming biologically results in removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, storing the carbon in the soils, improved quantities and nutritional quality of crops, decreased hunger as farmers will now be able to at least feed themselves, decreased water pollution due to chemical runoff from farms, and decreased health costs due to starvation and malnutrition. Next. Want to thank you for listening. So far, you've been observers of this presentation. Now I would like to ask you to be participants by answering a couple of questions. How can we make this strategy more effective? Who might be interested in making this strategy real? And what do you suggest as the possible next steps? Thank you.
So thank you all for making that presentation. We'll move on now to see if there's any feedback for you. As soon as we can get rid of the screen share, we'd like to thank you. So I'm not sure if any of you have got your hands up for offering feedback, but which means, that you're up, thank you. I was just gonna say this means that I get to fill some space, but I'll gladly back off of that to hear what you have to say.
Just a quick, great strategy, great plan, great presentation. What I've realized is we're talking about food security, and focus should be on getting communities cultivate or grow their own food, what they eat. Because like we're introducing new food into the systems and people are being weaned off their local food, which under normal circumstances will fit the environment that they live in. And so bringing in new crops and all those things, I think is one of the reasons why we're having this problem of insecurity, food insecurity. And also the fact that people are concentrating more on cultivating to export rather than feeding the country, feeding themselves first, or individuals feeding. I see you fit it inside there, that the farmers will then be able to feed themselves. That is a great thing to do, that they concentrate on feeding themselves first, and then if there is excess that can go to other places, then that should happen. But cultivating biologically, I think some communities already do that, going in to complement and make that happen even more frequent. I think that's a great way forward. Thank you.
So next up is Jim Walker.
Great job, guys. And I love the hub aspect, and I thought that made a lot of sense of having the one farmer in the area kind of train the other farmers. I guess this is a question, and I think it's implied, is the biological farming, has there been some breakthroughs happening that's going to make this more effective right now? Speak to that for a second, and then I have some other comments.
I'm sure, I'm sorry, didn't hear you very clearly.
No, I'm just, how much, is this biological farming? I'm suspecting there's been some breakthroughs in understanding this, of how the biological farming is more effective, like the new research has come out.
Yes, definitely. For the last 10 years, the Soil Food Web School has been teaching and graduating consultants and laboratories, and have been providing a great amount of demonstrations on the benefits of growing this way.
Okay. Yeah, and so that, I mean, to me, that might be a place where you could sharpen up in your strategy, and I don't know if you call it bio-smart farming, or because I think people's, like, as you sell this in, try to convey there's been some real progress here, because organic farming, I think, has been in the air for a long time, but maybe dial up the fact that this is kind of a next generation, and then also some statistics on yield per acre. In other words, again, I don't know the data, but I'm guessing there's pretty impressive crop yields, and sort of the tangible impact of switching over compared to conventional agriculture. Maybe just have some stats like, bio-smart farming is X times more yield, it uses this much less fertilizer, but kind of dial up the story a little bit. But, like I said, I think the hub approach is a great way to frame it out. To me, just dial up the upfront story a little more.
So Elena.
Hi, yeah, great presentation. Thank you so much. I will first premise my remarks by saying this is not my field of expertise, so I apologize. But I agree with what Jim just said. I find myself a little skeptical about the scalability. I wasn't quite convinced. And whether it's getting some quotes from FAO papers or some research or nature-based papers, something that is published that shows that there has been some kind of breakthrough. You had mentioned fertilizers and pesticides, it's part of the problem, but I didn't understand why. And I can obviously as an environmentalist understand that degrades topsoil and it's over abusing soil, et cetera. But I think connecting the dots in that storyline a little bit tighter and with some actual quantified facts and figures would really strengthen your argument. And then my last point is also on kind of where you concluded. So the problem being hunger, and then concluding that we're helping farmers to cultivate better. I'm not sure we're connecting the dots on those things. So how are we actually making sure that this does address the issue of hunger? Who is hungry? Those figures that you gave at the very beginning, making sure that we just bring this story all the way back around at the end would be important. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Jim?
Yeah, so again, lots of great stuff in here, and you've clearly done a lot of thinking. The first thing that came to my mind was the last global synthetic meta-analysis that I've seen in crop production was that conventional agriculture produced on average about 18% more per hectare than either organic or biological farming. That was published in Nature Sustainability a couple of years back. The other thing, and potentially more important, is that there's increased variability on an annual basis for biological farming and conventional agriculture, which could lead to sort of issues of risk, and that may be one reason that this hasn't. But that is actually my biggest question is why hasn't this been forward? Right? What are the limiting factors? You came up front with a statistic about between 10 and 80% of crop loss post-harvest. Is enough food being grown already? And is it not being collected, transported appropriately? So I think, to me, that's where there's this disconnect of who's hungry, how is the food getting to those people, and do we know in these places that it's a lack of production that's the problem, right? I mean, we saw this in Venezuela in the past 5 years. Agricultural productivity dropped by 60%. Nothing to do with knowledge, nothing to do with access to resources. It was about political stability, essentially, right? So are the incentives lined up? What are the limiting factors? And is it really productivity? So I think those are a couple of connections that I'd really like to see develop further as you push this idea forward, which it's a great idea. There's huge amounts of ancillary benefits to biological farming, so we want to push you away from any means. But I think there's definitely got to be a tighter connection between all these.
Thank you. Matthew, you're up. Thank you for.
Yeah, sure. Just a couple of comments. It's Matty Stanislaus. So I thought you sort of really good in terms of the stories and the use of data. I like the link with carbon sinks and soil health. Related to I think Elena's comment about comparison to the consequence currently of synthetic farming, the excessive use of pesticides would be good, and also how that relates to kind of outcomes in terms of production. I would, look at the logistical issue of delivery of the food to where to you, the consumers of food, and then how you could also look at the logistics in terms of a low carbon or no carbon mechanisms. The other thing is how would you consider extreme weather and resiliency in the production? We have to globally look at how do we grow species that are resilient to extreme weather events. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Alexandra.
Thank you so much for this very thoughtful presentation. I think one thing that really stuck out to me, so I actually used to work with a nonprofit that specializes in translating books into local languages. And I just want to point out that that's not a small feat. A lot of the education that we right now have are in the main languages, French, English, Spanish, these big languages, but a lot of local communities might not speak that language. So finding really niche languages in these communities that you have to explain through and to educate these people through is going to be quite a big undertaking. So I do want to make sure that you're thinking about that as well, and kind of dig into what it even takes to, find the specific local languages that you need to target. So identifying it. Is there anyone that even speaks that local language and English or whatever the resource you're translating from, right? So what are the disconnects there? So, but otherwise, I think this is really, really a great idea.
Thank you. Kurt has something.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, once again, it's wonderful work, huge vision, enormous potential. So what do we know from studies? That agriculture is probably the most significant thing with respect to climate. If we started doing things, better, we would not just be saving the soil, but we have a huge impact on climate, and lots of good stuff out there. You don't have to look very far to find it. So that's a thing, almost it's not independent, but it really strongly supports your mission. And what I would say is that, and I'm feeling some of the stuff we use organic practices here, and I've been involved in that community for a while, and with the Dr. Ingram and the Soil Food Web, so a little familiarity. I think permaculture is a great ally, if you will. I think many times if soil isn't being farmed, it's because it's degraded and maybe the water isn't being managed. And so then working with permaculturists with cover crops and putting things in to capture the water, etc., can be a great process to do it. Previous comments about starting at a community level, so feed themselves, I think has huge potential. It solves a bunch of the stuff we worry about, logistics and etc. The other thing is it helps us. Oh my gosh, it's so big, we've got to solve everything at once. No, we don't. If we can solve something, or not even solve it, if we could supply 25% of the community's food with local, that's enormous. Okay. And so then this, once again, the idea of prototyping, starting small, working with permaculturists who are already working overseas and from the North America, I should say, people I know could refer you to. So there's a huge potential, and the whole idea of training, once again, once you get something started in one community, people can go over one, lots of human potential there as well. So yeah, I would say it's, from its, everything about food is absolutely right, but I think the support on climate is also huge, and it's also a way to get a lot of interest in funding. But once again, prototype, I would do something as quick, as you can, but do it on a practical basis. Talk to permaculturists who actually, they don't just have gone to a class and they'll tell you the latest stuff, but they've actually got a track record of doing stuff in other climates and locales, and see what they would tell you to do, and then combine those things together. Would be synergetic. So thank you.